Let's build one of the biggest villains in anime history as a playable character in D&D and build FRIEZA from Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super as a playable character. Honestly, one of the hardest parts about this was choosing this species, but he's got horns in some of his various forms and transformations, at least in his early ones, and he's got a tail, so I'm gonna go with a tiefling. We get to choose a specific type of tiefling if we want to, and this was also a tough choice. We get one of 3 choices. Each one of them gives a cantrip and 2 spells at various levels, but one of them grants the spell Ray of Enfeeblement at level 5. And I just kind of feel like FRIEZA would call Goku some sort of feeble ape or something, and that just seems kind of fitting. So that's the only reason I wound up going with a chthonic tiefling, I think that's how you pronounce it. I think following the same spelling convention as Cthulhu. We can choose charisma for all of our legacy spells, which is what we're going to do because charisma is going to be a main focus here. By default, we get the thaumaturgy cantrip right away, and we get the chill touch cantrip from being chthonic, as well as the spell false life at level 3 and ray of enfeeblement at level 5. Then we get to choose a background, and I wanted to stick with mostly 2024 stuff, so thinking about the fact that FRIEZA comes from a long line of conquering whatever with King Cold, Cooler, and then FRIEZA, we're going to go with the background, Noble. This gives us the skilled feat, so we get 3 skills on top of everything else we're going to get throughout this build, so we're going to go ahead and grab Arcana, Survival, and Perception. And on top of all that, we, by default, get History and Persuasion just from being a noble. This background also focuses on Strength, Intelligence, and Charisma as far as the ability scores, but we're going to slim that down to just 2 with Strength and Charisma, winding up with a bit of a weird point spread that looks like this. And the reason we have this weird ability score layout is because we're going to be doing a bit of an interesting multi-class. And we can take levels in any order that we want except for the very first and very last level. So the very first level is important because we're going to be starting with a paladin. The reason we want to start with a paladin is because it gives us proficiency in all armor. Now, FRIEZA doesn't necessarily wear armor, but he does have the ability to sort of create some armor on himself. So with this idea in mind, we're going to wind up being able to wear heavy armor and utilize that strength to do so. We also get 2 skills, and we're going to choose Intimidation and Athletics. We get Lay on Hands, so we have a pool of healing that we can use on ourselves because chances are FRIEZA is not going to use it on anybody else. And we get some spell casting. The main spells we really want to grab though are Divine Smite, because every paladin needs a good smite, Shield of Faith, so that way we can shield ourselves a bit better, which boosts our armor class by 2. And then I really want to make sure we grab Thunderous Smite. There's going to be a very good reason why we do this later. Also at first level of Paladin, we get a Weapon Mastery, but we don't really care about that for this build. So we're just going to skip the Weapon Mastery stuff. Because at second level of Paladin, you get a Fighting Style. And we're going to choose Unarmed Fighting, so that way you can have some just straight up punching attacks, and that's more FRIEZA's style. Also at second level of Paladin, you get Paladin Smite. So the Divine Smite spell is automatically prepared, and you can cast it a certain number of times at its base level for free. Then at third level of Paladin, you get Channel Divinity. This will allow you to sense celestials, fiends, or undead nearby, but also at this level we can use it for something else because we're gonna choose our Paladin subclass. And this is why I wanted to start with Paladin as well, because you're going to go with an Oath of Conquest. Your FRIEZA, Conquest is kinda your thing. So now you have additional options for using your Channel Divinity. You can use it on Conquering Presence to frighten a bunch of creatures nearby, or you can use Guided Strike, giving you supernatural accuracy and giving you a plus 10 to your attack roll. Then at 4th level of Paladin, we get an ability score improvement, and we're going to go ahead and take a feat because we need to improve 1 ability score, but we don't care that much about it. So getting a feat that gives us a +1 into an ability score is going to be much more helpful. So we're going to take Warcaster. This will give us the chance to boost our wisdom score by 1 point, which is what we really need for a specific requirement. This feat also makes it so whenever we're concentrating on a spell, we have advantage on our concentration checks. We can use a spell as an opportunity attack, which is super powerful to do. So if somebody's trying to get away with you, you can just blast the crap out of them, but it has to be a single target spell. And on top of everything else, you don't have to worry about using your hands for casting anymore. Then at 5th level of Paladin, you get extra attack. So now you can punch twice whenever you need to. And you get Faithful Steed. And early on, FRIEZA is very often just kind of riding around in his orb thing. So Faithful Steed kind of feels just fitting. It basically gives you the Find Steed spell for free, and you can cast it a certain number of times per day for free. But also at this level, we do get access to a slightly higher level of spell casting. So there's 2 other spells I want to grab here. One is Spiritual Weapon, just because it's kind of cool to have. And the other is Hold Person, because holding up Krillin and then destroying him was kind of a big deal. But now it's time for a multi-class. And because we now have 13 points in Wisdom, we can multi-class into Cleric. Because in the anime, it came out later that it turns out that FRIEZA was kind of working for Beerus, the god of destruction. So I want to make sure we get that into this overall build to really fit with the character. Clerics do get some general abilities and some spell casting, but the main thing we're going to do is skip right to level 3 of Cleric, because that's most of what we care about, because this allows us to choose a Cleric subclass. And we want the God of Destruction, but there's no Destruction Cleric. So I made sure to find the closest representation of that. There's one Cleric subclass that has Destruction in the build repeatedly, and that's a Tempest Cleric. And this gives us 2 features right at level 3. The first is Wrath of the Storm. So if a creature hits you with an attack within 5 feet of you, you can force it to make a dex save, and if it fails, it takes 2d8 damage. It can be lightning or thunder damage, your choice, and it still takes half damage even if it succeeds on the saving throw. But more importantly, we get the feature Destructive Wrath, because it's a god of destruction. So this allows us to use our channel divinity from being a cleric to activate this ability, and it really amps up our damage if we do it right. So whenever you would roll any lightning or thunder damage, using this channel divinity allows you to maximize the roll. So you don't even have to roll dice, you just take whatever the maximum is. Now, obviously Cleric is also a spellcaster, so they get a whole bunch of spells, but we need to focus mostly on the ones that don't really rely on our wisdom that much. So grab things like Resistance or Guidance, which you're just going to be using on yourself to help protect yourself or improve your ability rolls. You can grab Bless to boost yourself up a bit more. Cure Wounds to cast on yourself for some self-healing. You can grab Sanctuary to protect yourself, or something like Locate Object to locate the Dragon Balls. There's a whole bunch of other stuff we are going to throw on the character sheet up on Patreon, but I'll go ahead and leave those up there. I don't need to dwell on it too much. Because now we're going to do another multi-class, and we need some of FRIEZA's transformations. It's got a bunch of them, so we need them really quick. And Sorcerer added that in 2024. Obviously, sorcerers get some spell casting, but they also get the feature Innate Sorcery. So as a bonus action, you can activate some sort of sorceress transformation, which boosts you considerably. So you can transform as a bonus action for 1 minute, and when you're transformed, when you cast any sorcery spell that requires a saving throw, the difficulty challenge rating of it is increased by 1 point. And on top of that, any of the attack rolls associated with a sorcery spell are going to be at advantage. You can use this transformation twice per long rest. And we're going to save all the spells for a little bit later, but let's dive through some of the other sorcery features first. Because at 2nd level of Sorcerer, you get Font of Magic, allowing you to get sorcery points. You have a number of sorcery points equal to your level in Sorcerer, and you can convert sorcery points to spell slots for more spell casting, and vice versa. But you also get meta magic at 2nd level of Sorcerer now in 2024. You can choose 2 right away, and we're going to choose Quicken Spell, allowing you to take any spell that would take an action to cast and cast it as a bonus action instead, or you can spend a sorcery point for Transmuted Spell. And this is super powerful when combined with being a Tempest Cleric, because now you can take any elemental damaging spell that's like fire, lightning, cold, whatever, and transform it into a different elemental damage. So if you transmute it into thunder or lightning, you can use your channel divinity for Destructive Wrath, maximizing the damage of basically any spell that you would want to cast. So if you want to turn your fireball into a lightning or thunderball, you're getting that maximized effect, which is awesome. Then at 3rd level of sorcerer, you get to choose a sorcerer subclass. And there's not that many that would fit super well as far as the character, so we're just going to lean into the namesake of the show and try to amp up our damage overall by going with a Draconic Sorcerer. This immediately gives us the feature Draconic Resilience, so your hit point maximum is increased by 3 points, and you get an additional 1 hit point of health added to your maximum every time you level up in Sorcerer. And on top of that, if you didn't happen to be wearing any sort of armor, but we would be wearing armor, but it's important to note this, your armor class is now 10 plus your dexterity modifier plus your charisma modifier, because you now have just dragon-like scales or some sort of hardened shell on yourself. You also get a handful of spells by choosing this subclass, one of which is Alter Self, which we can count as another transformation because just allows you to alter yourself, obviously. Then at 4th level of sorcerer, you get an ability score improvement, so we're going to go ahead and boost up our charisma by 2 points because we really need that at this point. But remember, you can take these levels in any order, so if you're really dying for some more charisma, you can grab it earlier. Then at 5th level of sorcerer, you get sorceress restoration. So on a short rest, you can actually regain half of your total sorcery points back, but you can only do this once per long rest. Then at 6th level of sorcerer, you get another feature from being a Draconic Sorcerer, and this is called Elemental Affinity. So you got to choose some sort of element, and we're going to be sticking with the theme that we're doing lightning or thunder damage, so let's just go ahead and stick with lightning because it's just kind of cooler. You have resistance to that type of damage, and whenever you cast a spell that deals that type of damage, you can actually add your charisma modifier to it. And just to make sure you get another transformation under your belt in case you ran out of that innate sorcery stuff, at 7th level of sorcerer, you get sorcery incarnate. So you can actually spend 2 sorcery points to get another innate sorcery transformation in case you ran out. But on top of that, this feature also allows you to use 2 meta magic options on a single spell instead of just being limited to 1. And this is a great improvement in 2024. I love this idea. Then at 8th level of sorcerer, you get another ability score improvement. So we're going to go ahead and max out that charisma. At 9th level of sorcerer, you just get an upgrade to your spell casting. And then at 10th level, you get 2 more meta magic options. So we're going to grab heightened spell for our first one, which would force disadvantage on a saving throw when you're doing some sort of saving throw spell. And then even though this one was massively nerfed in 2024, I'm going to grab twin spell. It used to be that you could twin cast a spell allowing you to target 2 creatures of a single target spell instead of just 1, but now they added a limit to this to an extreme degree. Now you can only do it to a spell that would be allowed to be upcast to target more than 1 creature. And there's a lot of spells that don't do this. There's still a few very important ones that do allow for this, so I'm still going to grab it, but I'm a little disappointed in how this was nerfed. But I'm sure that there's a reason that Wizards of the Coast did this, because I'm sure it had a lot of game-breaking possibilities before. I'm just disappointed I can't do twin hasting anymore. Then at 11th level of sorcerer, you get an upgrade to your spellcasting again, and then at 12th level of sorcerer, you get an ability score improvement. And at this point, we are max level, which means that we can grab an epic boon with this ability score improvement if we want to. And the one thing we're kind of lacking is health. So we're going to grab the Boon of Fortitude. This allows us to increase 1 ability score by 1 point. And we do have an odd number in wisdom, so might as well boost that up by 1 point. But this boon also increases our maximum health by 40 points. And whenever you regain any hit points, you can add your Constitution modifier to the amount that you regain. But you can only do that once per turn. But now that we got all that out of the way, it's time to get some sorcery spells. You can still do plenty of punching, but that's not going to be as powerful as your blasting. I will save some of the overall spells with the character sheet up on Patreon, but there's a great one that got added in 2024, and I love it. It's called Sorcerous Burst. It's a cantrip, and it allows you to choose one of most types of damage, either acid, cold, fire, lightning, poison, psychic, or thunder, and this spell does a D8 of damage. It goes to 2d8 at level 5, 3d8 at level 11, and 4d8 at level 17. But if you happen to roll an 8 on any of those damage dice, you get to roll an additional D8. You can only add a maximum number of D8s equal to your spellcasting modifier, but really weird way to use this if you really want to. You can make it do lightning or thunder damage You can use your Destructive Wrath ability and then maximize it, meaning that by default you're rolling 8s because you don't have to roll them, you just deal the maximum damage, which means that you can then add all of those extra d8s if you want to. But that's only if you want to use that very limited Channel Divinity feature on a cantrip. But then when it comes to actual leveled spells, you want to grab Shield for a boost to your overall defenses, because you need that sometimes. And you got to grab Silvery Barbs just to ruin somebody's day, mostly the DMs, but you're kind of a bad guy. Using Silvery Barbs definitely seems to be something in your wheelhouse. When you get to second level spells, grab Blur and Scorching Ray. Don't forget, you can turn Scorching Ray into more of a Shocking Ray or Lightning Ray or Thunder Ray or whatever you want to call it. Once you get to third level spells, make sure to have Fly, because that's just kind of a necessity. Even though you do have Fine Steed and you can basically ride your orb thing throughout the air if you need to. But make sure to also grab Haste in case you want to rely more on your punches than anything else, which boosts your armor class by 2. It doubles your movement speed, it gives you advantage on dex saves, and you can make 1 additional physical attack as part of your attack action, which feels like another transformation to add on top of everything else. And don't forget, Lightning Bolt is a very powerful line spell, but in case everything's grouped up in a much more circular fashion, grab Fireball, and then turn it into a Lightning Ball or a Thunder Ball. You can maximize the crap out of it, make it do a bunch of damage, and hit everything. But there's actually one other thing that's great as far as a possible transformation. That's Asher Dahlon's Stride. So this boosts your speed by 20 feet, which makes you pretty darn fast. And then when you move within 5 feet of a creature or object, it takes 1d6 fire damage. But that creature can only take this damage once per turn. However, you can upcast this ability, and for every level above 3rd level that you cast it at, it increases your speed by 5 feet, and it deals an additional 1d6 fire damage. And I should note that you get to ignore opportunity attacks when you do this. So if you wind up upcasting the crap out of this, you can actually make yourself insanely fast and then turn that damage into lightning or thunder damage if you want to. And you can add your charisma modifier to the lightning damage thanks to your draconic stuff. And you can think of this as when you're insanely fast right after a transformation and you run past somebody doing a bunch of lightning damage, then come up behind them to just punch them in the back. And you're so fast they can hardly keep up with you at that point. Trust me, I ran into a situation where a player in one of my games used this in a very broken fashion and absolutely decimated an encounter. Then at 4th level, there's not too many that I would grab, but Storm Sphere is pretty awesome. At 5th level, you want to grab something like Cone of Cold for just a big AoE blast that you can turn into lightning or thunder if you want to. But make sure to top it off with something like Far Step for quick teleportations all around, or Telekinesis to grab Krillin and bring him up in the air right before you destroy him. You want a bit more of a chaining attack with something at 6th level like Chain Lightning, but once you bring Krillin up in the air, there's also a great spell to use at 6th level called Disintegrate, because that's essentially what you do, which deals 10d6 plus 40 force damage. And if you reduce a creature to 0 hit points with this ability, you actually just disintegrate them, meaning they can't be resurrected by anything short of the Wish spell or True Resurrection, meaning they gotta go around and find those Dragon Balls. But I wanted to make sure we get at least one more transformation. So if you're turning into Golden Frieza, you can grab Tasha's Otherworldly Guise. This can either make you immune to fire and poison damage or radiant and necrotic damage. And considering most of what the Saiyans are probably going to use as radiant, that's pretty darn powerful. It can make you immune to the poisoned or charmed condition. It gives you a flying speed of 40 feet, boosts your armor class by +2. All of your weapon attacks are then magical, so if you're punching a bunch, you're suddenly dealing magic damage instead, and you can use your spellcasting ability modifier for your attack and damage rolls, meaning that you can just rely on your charisma, which is maxed out, and it's going to be better than your strength. The last part of this spell is that it gives you extra attack, but you already have that, so that part doesn't matter. But this is a massive boost, and it would basically make you immune to most of the blasts that somebody like Goku would be dishing out. I think that's a great way to finish off the build with a powerful spell like that. But remember, you can take these levels in any order. So if you want to take one level in Paladin and then take a bunch of levels in Sorcerer, you can do that and jump over to Cleric whenever you want that Destructive Wrath ability. Just make sure that your last 1 or 2 levels includes that ability score modifier so you can grab that epic boon, because the only requirement for an epic boon is that you're level 19. This was all thanks to a vote over on my Discord, and everybody really wanted to see FRIEZA, so I figured I'd finally dish him out. But if there's anything you do differently with this build, let me know in the comments down below. If you want access to the character sheet for this build or any of my other builds, including some that got taken down from YouTube thanks to some copyright issues because Japan doesn't have fair use copyright laws, which is very frustrating, feel free to check out my Patreon, where I have all of that stuff and you can just access it at the base level, just like some of these amazing people that help support this channel, or some amazingly awesome patrons that really just wanted a shout out, like my player character patrons: Kiyosharo, Vakart, Alexander White, Ravelord, Nicole Biliak, The Holy 999s, Christopher Sams, Barrow Scruel, Felix Ulick, The 10586, Kevin Shirley, That Funny Man 57, CGC 2014, Panda Milkshake, Karkat Kitsune, Decker Joint, Set 13, Viral Naravar, and Daniel Galvin. Then there's the Dungeon Master level patrons that I play D&D with over on Twitch: Brian Dunn, Dante Dixon, T Brownie, Julia B. De Oliveira, Shane Gilroy, Daniel Saffler, Comment ZX, GameSteak, and Devin Happy. And if you made it all the way to the end of this video, let me know by hitting that like button, and I'll be here hoping you roll at least 3 nat 20s in your next D&D session, especially if you want to play as one of the best villains in all of anime, FRIEZA from Dragon Ball Z and Dragon Ball Super in Dungeons & Dragons.